Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, sponsored by ACR Poker, where this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we have our $1,000 free roll, the TPE free roll on ACR Poker this Sunday, July 14th. And to learn how you can enter the TPE free roll, click the link in the description and join the TPE Discord. My name is Clayton Fletcher, and I am in fabulous Las Vegas, where the main event is in full swing, and my good friend Matthew Stout is in the top 30 of chip stacks with 450 players remaining, entering day 5 as I record this on Thursday, July 11th, 2024. A little bit of podcast run good for our special guest from 2 weeks ago, and I hope that our boy takes it down. Matt Stout is a great human being. He does a lot of charity work, obviously, through the WSOP. He's also just a really good guy who deserves to have millions and millions of dollars in the bank. Anyway, of course, I'm rooting for Matt, and we're going to also talk a little bit about my main event experience this year. Spoiler alert, it is over. But first, I want to look at a hand that we talked about last week from the $1,600 million guarantee at the Venetian, as played last month by yours truly. But I want to look at the same hand we talked about last week, and this time I want to use my favorite poker tool, GTO Wizard. Now, this is by far the most user-friendly solver on the market. It's not only a solver you can put in your hands and it will help you find leaks in your game. You can practice against a perfect AI robot genius who never makes a single mistake and realize exactly how bad you are at this game. You can study different spots, and like we're going to do today, we're going to actually take the hand that I played last week and we're going to figure out whether my play was okay and whether my opponent's play was okay. And all of this is with the help of GTO Wizard. So again, it's a $1,600 buy-in with multiple starting flights. The blinds were $1,500, $2,500 with a $2,500 big blind ante. So about 3/4 of the way through the day, well after dinner, kind of getting late. I have an average stack, 35 big blinds, about 90,000 in my stack. My M was 14, and I opened from the low jack with ace of spades, queen of diamonds, and the button called with pocket sixes. Now, in reality, the big blind also called, but for our purposes in analyzing this hand today, we're going to pretend that the big blind folded. So we'll be heads up, out of position, hero with the ace queen off, and the button with the pocket sixes. And with 20,500 in the middle, the flop came ace of diamonds, 9 of spades, 7 of clubs. By the way, guys, obviously GTO Wizard has no issue with anyone's play pre-flop. It's fine to open ace queen, and it's fine to call with sixes. So ace 9, 7, rainbow. I decided to bet, and the button called with sixes on ace 9, 7. So from my standpoint first, if you are the pre-flop raiser and you flop an ace with ace queen on ace 9, 7, it's actually a mixed strategy, including a 25% check frequency. And that may come as a surprise to many of you. You know, we flop an ace. Are we really going to check 1 time out of 4 on ace 9, 7? You want to give a free card to like jack 10 suited to possibly beat you? But yeah, we need to, when we get called in position and we are out of position, we need to check from out of position a high percentage of the time. Your continuation bet frequency should be much, much higher when you are in position than when you are out of position. So that is demonstrated here by this solver output. We checked 25% and we bet all different sizes the rest. So I'll give myself an A for betting this flop. I bet 1/3 of the pot, a little less. And Villain called with sixes. Now this is probably the most surprising part of all to me. The flop again was ace-9-7. My opponent called a 30% pot bet, and the solver wants him to do that 100% of the time. So I guess he's got some backdoor possibilities with the 9 and the 7 somewhat connecting to his pocket sixes, but I was shocked to see that we never fold the under pair with 3 overs out there in this situation, getting 4-1 on a call. But that's what we're supposed to do, so give my opponent credit for calling my flop bet. And now with 32,500 in the middle, the turn was the jack of diamonds. So now there are 2 diamonds out there, ace-9-7 jack, and it's up to me with ace-queen, and I decided to check. My opponent bombed it, betting 25K into the 32.5 pot, and I called. So let's talk about my decision first. Do I check ace-queen? Should I have bet again on that jack turn? The wizard actually does check 63% of the time in this spot, but when we do bet, we're supposed to bet big, like we're trying to get all in or something, because remember, we only start with 35 bigs. So clearly a large bet on 4th Street would be pot committing, to say the least. I'm glad I checked because I felt the hand was easier to play this way. But yeah, surprising that there's a 37% bet frequency, but in every case, you always bet at least 2/3 of the pot, and in some cases you overbet. So I checked, which we do 63%, so that's the number one play. I'll give myself another A. And the wizard checks behind 100% of the time with pocket sixes. The wizard never turns the sixes into a bluff on the jack of diamonds turn. Never. So my opponent gets an F for his ambitious play, betting into me and betting so big on 4th Street. When opponent does bet, which he'll never do with pocket sixes according to GTO Wizard, but let's just say that versus a range that does bet on 4th Street and bet big, like 85% of the pot, I am supposed to call 100% of the time with ace-queen. And now with 82,500 in the middle, and we only had 60,000 behind, just about 3/4 pot, and the river came the queen of spades, giving us top 2 pair. I checked again, opponent shoved, and I called. So the wizard always checks with ace-queen. Like once we get to the river in this way, we need to check again and keep all those bluffs in, I guess. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like on the turn, it went check, bet huge, and call. So it would be pretty odd for me to suddenly like donk shove the river after checking and calling a large bet on the turn. So yeah, we always check with top 2 here, and we always call the shove. Obviously, villain never is supposed to have pocket sixes and have played this way, but we can't consider folding ace-queen just because that is entirely too exploitable. And apparently my opponent was trying to exploit me, or perhaps he just got excited when I bet small on the flop and checked the turn. He felt like I had a marginal hand. Possibly I had capped my range, as people like to say, but that was just an assumption on his part, and we know what happens when we assume. Guys, if you want to learn more about GTO Wizard and about this amazing tool and how it works, I have a great offer for you. We have an affiliate link in the description of this podcast. You just click that link and you get 24 hours unlimited access to all of GTO Wizard's features. And then after that trial period is over, when you're ready to buy, you'll save 10% off your first purchase. But you have to click the link in the description, which is gtowizard.com/p/TPE. All right, now let's move on and talk about my main event. I actually arrived a little bit late. I entered in the middle of level 2, which is the 200, 300 level. There's a 300 big blind ante. And remember, you start this tournament with 60,000 in chips, and the levels are 2 hours long. So it is a marathon, not a sprint. It's cliched at this point, but it's also a fact. So there's no reason to rush and get there early and make sure you don't miss any hands in the main event. Although I always used to be there from the very beginning. I liked all the pomp and circumstance, whoever won last year or some other famous person saying shuffle up and deal. And I kind of got into the pageantry, and I still get butterflies in my stomach when I register to play in the most important tournament of the year. Each and every year, it is an honor and a privilege to be one of the 8,000 or so who sign up for this kind of experience, and I don't take it lightly. But at this point in my career, this is my 13th main event, and I did not feel the need to be there from the very beginning. I actually went to the gym, I got some sun, and I felt really ready to play. So I finally arrive at my table in the middle of level 2, and I sit at a table with no familiar faces, which is a good thing. Seat 1 was a beautiful black woman. I think she was probably a model. The guy next to me was coughing incessantly. It was day 1D, so I guess he figured he should just show up sick because there's no day 1E, and maybe he didn't want to enter early on day 2. So that was great, having someone cough very loudly into my ear for several hours, so that was not fun. Other players at my table, nervous-looking Midwestern guys, probably satellite winners, and then a couple of very serious-looking European professionals with headphones and sunglasses and hooded sweatshirts, and one guy even with a COVID mask. So, no judgment, but you just don't see that every day. Anyway, 200, 300, 300, and the under the gun player, which is the guy with SARS or whatever, coughs and opens to 700. The action folds all the way around to me, and I am in the big blind with the king of clubs, 5 of spades. So we're extremely deep, and we can certainly flick in another 400 to see a flop, which I did. That flop was 7 of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 6 of clubs, 7, 7, 6 with 2 clubs. I have king 5, including the king of clubs. Now, let's just speak generally. Don't worry about my exact hand, but generally speaking, is this a better flop for the under the gun opener or the big blind caller? Well, I think it's a much better flop for my range than it is for my opponent's range. Now, sure, he's going to have pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket queens, all of those big pairs, but he's also going to have like a ton of unpaired high cards, and very importantly, he's going to have almost no sevens. I have a huge nuts advantage here over this player. And in my experience of playing in the main event, players are way too tight on day 1. Generally, they just want to survive and make it to day 2. So I decided this would be a good flop for me to make one of my patented Clayton Fletcher moves. So I check raise. He bets just 500 on the flop, and I check raised immediately on the flop to 2,000. He thought about it for a minute and then called. And then the turn was the tray of diamonds. Now I decided to continue representing the 7 here. I also, let's notice, I picked up a straight draw, which is always cute and fun. I also have the king of clubs, which makes it less likely that my opponent has a flush draw. So there are a lot of river cards that I'll be able to bluff. Like if the third club comes out, I have that king of clubs. It's a great blocker. So opponent can't have ace, king of clubs, king, queen of clubs, king, jack of clubs. But of course I can. I mean, my range for check raising this flop includes a lot of combos of any 2 clubs. Now, I probably would not have bet the turn if it hadn't been a club or a card that improved my equity. But given that I picked up a gut shot, along with my overcard, along with my club blocker and all the other stuff I think I have going on here, I bet 5,000 into the 6,300 pot or whatever it was. And now my opponent called again. So I think the adventure is over unless we make a straight or the flush comes in. So that's my game plan now that my large turn bet got called. I'm not going to try to push this guy off of pocket aces anymore. I think that's what he has. And the river is the jack of diamonds. So yeah, that's definitely a give up card for me. I mean, I could put in another huge bet because again, I do have more sevens than he does. But yeah, I just put him on an overpair, and I just didn't really expect him to fold it often enough after he paid $5K on the turn. So I check, give up, and opponent checks very quickly behind and wins this large pot for the level with ace of clubs, trey of clubs. So he had a pair of threes, but he also had the nut flush draw. So in that sense, I was glad that the club didn't come in on the river because it's very hard to get a man to fold the ace high flush, even in level 2 of the main event. So I got off to kind of a bad start right there. A little while later, we had 45,000, which, by the way, is still 150 big blinds, even though really nothing had gone my way all day. I had the ace of spades, 10 of spades, and the player on my right, who was fairly solid, had opened from middle position. So I decided to call. I didn't really want to 3-bet with this hand because I really did want to see the flop, and I want to encourage more action behind me. I have a hand that plays pretty well in multi-way pots, so I didn't really feel like I needed to isolate the original raiser. And again, given that he was fairly solid, I'm not saying he was nitty tight, but a fairly solid player, I really didn't want to get 4-bet. So I just decided to flat. You can also fold this, by the way. I mean, ace 10 suited is not a monster hand. You can fold it, especially in the main. But I decided to call. And the big blind also called. The flop was queen, queen, jack with 1 spade. So I have a gut shot, an overcard, and a backdoor flush draw. So I bet 1,200 into the 2,500 pot, and the big blind folded, and the original raiser, who had checked to me on the flop, called. So now I'm heads up in position with ace 10 of spades on queen, queen, jack with the jack of spades. And the turn came the 8 of hearts, which is a nice card because it gives us a double gut shot. So I picked up some equity there, and opponent checked again, and now I bet 7,500 into the 5,000 pot. So it's a big over bet, about 150% of the pot. And I really expected to take this down a lot when my opponent had a hand like ace jack or ace king or pocket nines. So yeah, I feel like this is a pretty good bet. And bear in mind, I also need to make this bet when I have a hand like queen jack or king queen or something. So when I have a monster, I need to overbet this turn. I can't just do it when I'm semi-bluffing and pick up equity, because that is a very exploitable strategy. You need to make the same bet with the top of your range as you do with your bluffs. So he called again, which is basically announcing to me that he's got a queen. So I was not about to bluff again, and I wasn't even sure if I should bet the river if the straight had come in, but the river was the 6 of clubs. My opponent checked, and I quickly gave up as well, and yeah, he had pocket queens. So my strategy for next year's main event is not to overbet bluff into opponent who has 4 of a kind. All right, how about one more hand? This one is from the next level, so thankfully I had like a 20-30 minute break in between levels, and I came back to a stack of just 38,000, but still the blinds were just 200, 400 with 400 big blind ante, so I have almost 100 big blinds. My M is 38, so I'm fine. You know, even though every single thing that could go wrong already had gone wrong, I was still in a good position to make day 2, to possibly run up a big stack. I had determined that it was actually a pretty darn good table, although it wasn't fun to be next to a guy that was literally coughing all over me every 5 seconds. By the way, guys, that was several days ago and I don't feel sick. So shout out to my immune system. So the model that I mentioned earlier in the one seat made it 1,000, so 2.5 big blinds. And and she's under the gun in this hand. And I was in the hijack position with 2 black 8s. And I think you can 3-bet this from the hijack. And in a cash game, I probably would, to be honest. But I feel like in tournaments, it's okay to just call and set mine. I can also afford to call a 3-bet from my left. Now, the guy who keeps coughing, by the way, has proven himself to be a very loose player. And he also calls, which doesn't really mean that much. He has a very, very wide range. And the blinds fold, the button folded, so the 3 of us are going to see a flop. And it is Queen of Diamonds, 6 of Clubs, 5 of Clubs. Queen 6-5 with 2 clubs, Hero with pocket 8s, including the 8 of Clubs. The woman checked, and it's up to me. I think I can bet pocket 8s in this spot. It's okay to bet. I decided to check. I feel like it's probably a mix. With 2 opponents, it's a little dicey. My hand could be good a lot. But knowing that Robitussin on my left never folds, I decided to just give it a check and let him bluff if he wants. He checked behind, so we all checked the flop. And the turn came the 7 of spades. So now our board is Queen 6-5-7. We've got pocket 8s for a pair with an open-ended straight draw. And now she checks again. And I think it's time for me to bet. There's about 4,000 in the middle at this point, and I put in 2,500. The player on my left coughed and called, and our resident supermodel folded. So now I'm heads up, out of position, against a loosey-goosey who needs a Ricola, and the river is the 10 of spades. So final board, Queen, 6, 5, 7, 10. And we have pocket 8s, so I guess we block 8, 9, and that's the nuts. I check, and my opponent checks behind. I turn over my 8s very proudly, fully expecting the gentleman to turn over a hand like ace 5, and instead he's got ace 10. So he rivered me with ace 10 offsuit, and I simply can't believe that he called my turn bet with that hand when the original raiser was still waiting to act behind. I don't get it. I don't know, but I mean, I guess that's one reason why the main event is the best tournament in the history of the world. They'll call you with ace 10, even though they have 2 opponents. Anyway, I can continue. Maybe I'll tell you one more. There was another hand where I got involved with the cougher. I limped in from my small blind with the Jack 7 suited, and Mr. Emphysema checked. The flop was 10-7 tray rainbow, so I have middle pair and an overcard, whatever. I also have a backdoor heart draw, by the way, because the 10 is a heart, and we have Jack 7 of hearts. I decided to check this flop. My opponent has proven himself to be pretty loose and pretty aggressive, so I welcome him betting. I'm happy to check and call with my bluff catcher type of medium strength hand. I checked, he checked, and now the turn is the 6 of hearts, which actually gave me a flush draw to go along with my pair of 7s, and I decided to bet 800 into a pot of 1,200, and my opponent called. And the river was the king of clubs. I checked, and he checked, and won the pot with king, queen off. No heart. So then after dinner, I got moved to a new table. I had pocket kings, and I opened, and only the big blind called me. The flop was king 10-6, and my opponent, who was the tightest player at my new table, which was generally a much more pleasant table than the other one. King 10-6, I have the nuts, pocket kings. He checked, I bet 800 into, I think, 15 or 1600 at that point. No, it was more than that because the blinds had gone up to 300, 500, and I opened at 12. But yeah, it's more like 3K in there now. And I just bet 800, trying to get action from so many hands against a tight opponent. So just about 25% of the pot. And he called. The turn is the jack of spades, and he checked again. This time I bet 2,300, and he called. The river is the ace of diamonds. So our board is now king, 10, 6, jack, ace. And my opponent checks again. I really can't bet my set because I can't really get called unless my opponent has a queen. So I check behind, and sure enough, he had ace, queen. Now, when I started this hand with just 15,000, I think it's ridiculous that my opponent didn't 3-bet. I mean, I opened from the cutoff, and he's in the big blind with ace, queen. I was never worried about ace, queen at any point in time because I feel like we should have been all in pre-flop, but we only have 30 big blinds here. And this guy had over 120,000 in his stack. I don't know why he wouldn't want to 3-bet with ace, queen. So yeah, that's, great. It's always fun to flop the nuts and lose the pot. So after that hand, I only had 6,100 chips left, and it's getting late in the day. A very loose player who had been opening like 75% of the hands opened, and then I shoved with pocket sixes, and it folded back to the original opener. And when I showed my hand first, he said, well, you're going to love what you see, and he turned over pocket fives. And that was on the very next hand, by the way, after my disastrous pocket kings hand. So I did love what I saw, but I didn't love the flop, which included a 5, and that's how I busted out of the 2024 main event. So guys, this means 2 years in a row I have not made it to day 2. And when you think about the main event, you probably think, you start off the day with 300 big blinds with 2-hour levels. Like, how does anyone ever go bust on day 1? Well, flopping the nuts and losing is one way. Bluffing into opponents who have really strong hands is another way. And doing both of those things on the same day is the best way. So that'll do it for this episode. Still plenty of poker to play here in Vegas. I am looking forward to righting the ship, as it's been a pretty brutal summer for your boy. And most of all, I am rooting for Matt Stout to take it down in the main event this year, doing what I could not and making it all the way to day 5 already, and he's got a big stack. For everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, with special thanks as always to our very generous sponsor, ACR Poker, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas plays. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart.